So welcome to
Come and
the
go.
first of four sci-fi world building panels that we have going on for LitCon 2021. My name is Phoebe Darqueling. I will be the hostess for various things this weekend, including these wonderful world building panels. Wesley, I hope you can hear me now. If you can just
Yes,
tip
I
your
can. There
camera
was
towards
only
your face.
Yep.
Can you tip your camera down a bit?
I'm sorry, what?
Could you tip your camera towards your face a little?
There you
There
go.
we go. There's Wesley's
Ideal.
beautiful face.
Ah,
Just a quick introduction about me, and then we'll get to know our fabulous authors. I am a spec fiction author. I mostly write things actually using quack science from the 19th century. I love terrible science, but I consume good science fiction with gusto. So yeah, my work is mostly steampunk and silly, more goofy kind of things. But I'm looking forward to getting to know all of our authors here. So Andy, do you want to start us off with introductions?
Absolutely. Speaking of goofy, you start off the appropriate author. I have a series, and Wes is laughing because he's reviewed the books. I have a series that starts off with zombie turkeys, a terrible apocalypse that happens in 2015, right around Thanksgiving time. And then that naturally leads to more trouble in the next book with my undead mother-in-law. Everything is a parody of the zombie apocalypse genre. And I have a few political comments and societal comments as well. And then I try to top myself with my third book, where I put my zombies on a super yacht, Paranormal Privateers. They have a commission from the president, letter of marque, to go around the world fighting U.S. enemies that are too tough for the U.S. to deal with or too politically charged. And then I finished up with my fourth book, which is a short story collection. So I
Are there
took the
also
world
zombies?
as it was in November 2015 and added zombie turkeys.
All right then. All right, Bill. Do you want to let us know a little bit about yourself and your work?
Yeah, sure. I'm Bill McCormick. I have no zombies. I'm sorry. I feel bad now. I've got a few things out. I got a series called The Brittle Riders, which just got compiled into an omnibus. So if you need a 1,200-page book to beat someone to death with, I know where you can get one. So yeah, we got that, and it's got a lot of good critiques on it. So people seem to like it. Then I got the companion book to that. It's called Goptri of the Mists, which is basically I took the Brittle Riders and set it in India because why not? And then I've got a near future science fiction thing called Splice that I just did for Watchdog Entertainment, and that's more like CSI, whereas the Brittle Riders and Gopri of the Mist is thousands of years in the future, very dystopian. It allows me to pick apart society and put it back together however I want. Splice happens like next week. It feels like it's really close to you happening, and that was kind of tough to write because you didn't want to write stuff that was out of date. But when the book got published, so when we were looking at putting things together, I put together that the first African American woman would be vice president, and God damn it, Kamala Harris got elected. Like the book came out, everyone went, "Yay, this is a great!" Oh, blah, 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 blah.
No, that just means that you're prescient.
Yeah,
You just could tell the future.
Oh yeah, everyone should buy your books in the future now.
Right?
Yeah.
Put in lotto numbers. Put in lotto numbers. All right, awesome. And Wesley, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work?
well, hello everybody. I'm Dr. Wesley Britton. I write all kinds of stuff. Mostly in the last 5-6 years, I've been working on the Beta Earth Chronicles. That is, February 22nd is now 8 books long. 4 of them are set on Beta Earth. 1 is set on Seraphim Earth. The others are kind of sympathize with Bill, are set on our planet in the not so distant future. And I've discovered it's really tricky to try to write about a world post-COVID, because now that we've had the COVID epidemic, you can't really not acknowledge it if you're going to talk about the future. So I had to bring in aspects of that as I creating the latest batch of short stories that haven't been published yet, but they're in the works. And it's going to be kind of tricky to, I guess I want to really wait until all this settles down, if it ever settles down, because in my book I have all these plagues that come. So in a way, I've done 3 world building exercises: Beta Earth, Serapent Earth, and Us in the Future. And that's where I'm at. No zombies, no turkeys, no like that. I leave that to Andy. He's got that covered, especially flying zombie pickles.
Well, I guess I was going to ask about writing sci-fi in a world where COVID exists. And Wesley, you brought it up. I was going to bring it up later, but we might as well talk about it now. I'm a little bit, like I said, I like to write stuff in the 19th century, so I'm good. I just have to deal with cholera.
Okay.
So yeah, so far anyway, for me, this hasn't been so much of an issue. I like to write things that are set in the past, but yeah, do you guys have any thoughts on this, Andy or Bill?
Yeah, when I wrote Splice, I finished writing it just as the pandemic was starting, and we kind of circled around it a couple of times to see if I was going to add anything with COVID. And the feeling then was they're going to have this knocked down in a month or two, and it'll be gone because we have adults in charge. Boy, was we fucking wrong. Anyway, so we didn't address it, and the book went to the editors, and it went to the printers, and went to pre-readers and beta readers, and I even got a retired Army captain to review it because some of it takes place with this. The book's about the birth of a supervillain. There are no heroes in the book. It's kind of weird, kind of different. There are 5 characters that are never named. They're just this guy, that guy, you know. So it's a very tough book, and I wanted to make sure I got the military stuff right. So this guy read it for me and started advertising it before it was edited. So he's like,
"Oh my!
I gotta buy this book." I'm like, "No, wait till we get it printed." But we got it. We got it, and it's out now.
Pre-sales. You can buy pre-sales here.
Yeah, from the Army. But yeah, we tried to address it. We honestly, I don't think anyone saw this coming.
No.
I mean, the book got written. I wrote the book. I wrote the movie because I got hired to do that as well. And they were going to put all this out middle of last year, and obviously just kept getting shoved down the road. So hopefully they can get, people can get vaccinated. These guys can go out and shoot a movie, and I can get the rest of my money, and that's all good stuff as far as I'm concerned. It's not $1 million like my buddy guy that I talked to you about before we went on the air, but still enough money that I would go, okay, thanks. No, that's it. But yeah, it's. I'm not sure how people are going to address this because you're going to have to,
Well, I know that there's some concern about, if I put this in, is it going to date my book? Right? Is this going to make it very clear that it happened in 2020, 2021 when I was writing this? So I hear this among fiction writers as well as screenwriters about like, you pretend it didn't exist because then it makes your thing more timeless, or is it better to talk about it because it's real? How do you feel about it, Andy?
Oh, I've been trying to ignore it as we go along. So far, it has not affected my book's timeline. And in the alternate world I've created using the zombie bacteria treatment, it's probably irrelevant.
Yeah.
So it's probably not relevant for my world, but,
Sure.
but of course there will be other books I will be writing where I must consider, is this a long-term thing or short-term, and be just something like the 1920 flu epidemic.
Wesley, did you have anything else on this topic?
In my books, now I've kind of turned COVID-19 into kind of the gentle plague, because by comparison with what's coming in my books, the weaponized viruses that the testing caliphate has been unleashing on the world estimates human population drastically in global warming. So, with what's coming, nothing. So it's going to be a weird way of looking at things, but that's the spin I tried to give it in these last 2 books. That's what's unfolded now.
Okay. Well, so I do have some questions prepared for you guys. Wesley, some of these will sound familiar because you've been on one of my panels before. I hope you don't mind.
No.
But I just want to start with asking, where in your books does the story primarily take place? Do you have one central location? Do people move around a whole bunch? How does that work in your world? So Andy, why don't you start us off?
Okay. I start in a very plebeian place, central Illinois, where I live. Small town Illinois, rural. That's where the zombie turkey plague begins. It then spreads small town by small town up to Chicago, Illinois. And it so happens there is a e-commerce dealer who called eTurkey that ships turkeys all over the country for people. They get the plague and they send it all over the country. So we won't tell you how it's resolved, but that is the sense of the issue. That's zombie turkeys. It goes countrywide. And then with Blind Dead Mother-in-Law and Paranormal Privateers, I go worldwide and then into outer space.
So it really is a viral sensation.
Oh, yeah. I wish.
Someone had to say it. Someone had to say it.
I can't be the only funny
you know
one.
How many book sales that'll get you there, Bill.
How about you, Bill? Where does your story primarily take place, or is it sort of everywhere?
Well, the Brittle Riders actually takes place in Chicago 4,000 years in the future.
Oh boy.
It starts out with the death of every man, woman, and child on the planet. Before it gets to chapter 1, I just kill everybody. And then
so it's real upbeat.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a happy book. One of the people who read it, a lady named Zhang, she read it. She said, it's like what would be if Frankenstein's monsters ruled the earth. And I thought that was a great line, so I use it now as a tagline because it's pretty much it. So it takes place mostly in northern Mexico and Chicago, and there's a reason for that makes sense in the book. It doesn't. When you say it out loud, it's like, huh? But in the book, it really makes sense.
You don't have to spoil anything. Don't worry.
And then the Gopri of the Myths, that takes place all in northern India. I kind of keep it on the northeast coast of India. And there's a lot of action that goes on there. And then Splice, the big part of Splice happens in New York, where he starts out being abandoned in Omaha, Oklahoma. I started him out as a 10-year-old kid with $50 in his pocket and a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, and it's in a rainstorm. And his life just goes downhill from there.
It's the high point.
Yeah, that's a good point. And until he ends up, this is in the book, he ends up joining the mob. And how that happens is brutal, just absolutely brutal. And one of the guys who lives here in Chicago who has what we call connections, he read the book to make sure I got that right. And he goes, the only way a black kid could end up in the mob is the way you wrote it. It's the only way it would happen. And because they're not notorious for their liberal leanings. And,
no.
So yeah, and it was, and he loved the book. So I guess I got something right. Everybody likes reading about themselves, I guess.
And Wesley, your worlds are vast and varied. So tell us a little bit about your primary location.
Well, and the first 4 books are all set on Beta Earth. By design, they start off in one country and then moves to another, then across the planet to other countries and continents. And that was by design. I wanted the major protagonist to keep going into new conflicts and powerful conflicts, bigger enemies, wider enemies, more international enemies. And so that makes it for a pretty big epic from beginning to end. Book 5 is all on a different planet that I guess is kind of concise by comparison. It's only 2 locations. And when I bring the remembrance to our planet 20 years in the future, they start off in the first pages in Jamaica. And by the end of the book, they're on horses going in their way to British Columbia, which is the primary setting for Alpha Tales 2044. So yeah, we're all over the place.
So do you guys, so I'm hearing a lot of names of real places that you're referencing. You just come right out and say this is Illinois or whatever, or do you sprinkle in little things for people to figure out where it is that it's taking place? How explicit are you about the location?
I am extremely explicit, right down to individual creek names in central Illinois. And then because the turkeys follow the creeks and the woods from central Illinois up to Chicago. And so it's a whole military strategy to try and keep them contained, which they fail. And then, of course, one of the big action chapters in the book is the Thanksgiving Day football game in Chicago between the Packers and the Bears at Soldier Field.
Boo, Packers. Sorry, I'm from Minnesota.
And it brought about a flock of 100,000 zombie turkeys. So we'll leave it at that.
Okay. Well, Wesley, how do you let people know where your characters are sitting?
Well, for the stories that are set on Alpha Earth, I try to be very specific and use an awful lot of research. A number of the stories based around the character of Mary Carpenter are set in Dallas and in Texas, and that's because I lived there for 20 years. So I was able to reference all the places that I know intimately well and locations and settings that are very familiar to me. Now, I admit that in Jamaica and British Columbia, two places I have never been, I had to rely entirely on research to try to get the details right and make it believable and all of that. The other books, they're all made up. I don't have to worry about that. In terms of the books, the story said here, that was a real challenge because if you're going to try to make it believable to people, if I'm going to send these aliens off trekking across Idaho, even after global warming and all that, it's still got to be believable. So I had to do a lot of homework to do that.
Well, and you have a special challenge because you're blind, and so you're writing about places that you have never seen before. So are you like reading travel logs? Are you talking to people who have been to these places?
Well, one of the places I have been, but yeah, I will admit that one of the things that is hard for me to work with is descriptions. You know, I don't know what I look like. Yeah, that's a challenge to try to figure out sensory descriptions, or at least visual descriptions of people, and to make them vivid. So that's just something that I have to keep working on. There's no magic bullet to that. I will say this, that at one time, I listened to a lot of movies that have the closed captioning at the bottom. And I remember watching one movie and they were describing the shades being blown in the window and all that. And it occurred to me what that narrator is doing is exactly what we as writers are doing. Wow. We're trying to take what is out there and put it into words. And so I said, well, from now on, I have to think of that narrator. What are the kinds of things that he's going to describe? You have to think of things that you might ordinarily think of, like the curtains blowing in the windows or those flickering here and there. You might not necessarily think to put that in a scene, but it makes it more believable and more vital if you have those kind of little details.
But you, Bill, how do you let people know where the characters are currently sitting during a scene?
They're in chairs usually. In Splice, because it's happening, near future and everything. When I talk about streets in Omaha and libraries and pizza parlors, and it gets pretty detailed, pretty accurate. And the nice thing is I've been to Omaha, so I know that it's a horrible place to live. And I'm in Chicago.
Nebraska audience.
Goodbye, Nebraska. Anyway,
your Nebraska sales.
Well, Omaha was the home for one of my favorite punk bands, Morphine Angel, so it makes up for that. It's kind of there. But anyway, so like as the book travels, the book goes from like Omaha to Chicago to New York to the Middle East to back and forth and doing some stuff, and lots of things happen all over the place. But everywhere I wrote about, I was very detailed about where they were at, how close they were. Like when they're in the Middle East, how close are they to the Afghani mountains? How close are they to this, to that, and so on and so forth. The Brutal Riders, on the other hand, complete opposite. I'm very nebulous about the locations. Chicago is called Gochi. I don't use any modern names at all. I use I had what was called like a multi-language dictionary. They had like 10,000 words from each language. And I just peeled back and forth for different things till I got to what I wanted. And so there's words from foreign countries. There's some Malaysian words in there. There's some German swear words in there. There's some Japanese in there, phonetic, and so on. And just put that together. So it's got this very otherworldly vibe. And it's funny, like my fiance read the book and she didn't realize it was set in Chicago at all. Never occurred to her, that, and the only thing I can do to make it people know that it's in Chicago, there's one scene where they drain a Great Lake. And that's the only reference you get, the Great Lakes. And if you're from the Midwest, you know what the Great Lakes are. And if you're not, you're like, oh, what the hell is that? But they drain it, and then bad people do bad things, and then it becomes just a pit. And it floods Louisiana because I'm evil. And but it's different for different books. I mean, some of my short stories I don't even describe the locations. But my short that just got sold, Fun Time at the Apocalypse at Go-Go, that one I'm down to like what color paint is on the walls. I mean, it's really descriptive, very vivid. The other one, the Tears, Twerking for Jesus, that one came out. That is just basically they're in a bus, they're on a plane. There's nothing give you background because I wanted the focus to be on the lead character and completely on that. And that got printed out by ICC magazine, and it's still on their website. You can go read it now. They paid me for it, so I don't care. I got paid. Go read it. Have fun.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because a lot of people go very big with their sci-fi, and like my most sci-fi stories that I've written, I have one where a woman is abducted from her bed, and you slowly learn that it's aliens. That all takes place in one location after her abduction, and then Riftmaker is my portal fantasy kind of sci-fi, and that's a city and then the forest just beyond the city. And so my scale is very, very small compared to what a lot of sci-fi writers like to do. I mean, I'm sure I'll go crazy and go all kinds of locations at some point, but so far the farthest I've taken anybody is like from Sacramento to on the Mississippi River.
Well, I think like when I did the Brittle Riders, one of the things I focused on was because I knew I was going to have to cover some ground geographically. So I made it all small scenes. It's a scene that happens in a bar. It's a scene that happens in a room. It's a scene that happens at a place. So that way you can go from scene to scene, but I know what you're talking about where somebody, they write and it's like, it's epic, it's spanning, it's opera. And you can actually hear the fat lady going, oh, in the back. And it's just, sometimes it's almost overwhelming, or actually that's redundant, it's whelming. And, I sometimes I couldn't get into some of that stuff. Sometimes I'll read it and I'm like 30 pages in and I'm like, I still have no idea who any of the characters are. We're talking about space and things. And
you're still chewing the scenery.
Yeah. At some point, please introduce me to Bob, who's supposed to be the reason I'm reading this damn book.
Yeah, right. So Bill, you brought up language stuff, which was actually my next question on my list here. So just to open it up to everybody, I'm really curious about the role that language plays in your imagined worlds, and if there's special slang that gets invented because of the events that happen in your world. So I don't know, Bill, if you want to start following up on what you were saying, you have this fabulous resource with all these different languages.
Right. Well, that got burned a few years back in a house fire. But anyway, yeah, I was not happy. But I'm kind of multilingual myself. At least I can order food in a bunch of languages. So that's a start. But language in the Brittle Riders, language plays a real key thing because they're thousands of years in the future. They're not going to be using the exact same syntax we are. So I took just because I'm a jerk and I like messing with people's heads, I took about 25 words that are common words like even, what even is, right? Well, I ascribed them completely different meanings. So I have no relation to the words you're using today. So you read it and it's like, wait, that doesn't make sense. Children are called smalls, for example. And so on and so forth. I mean, in context, they make sense, but it's kind of jarring to read them out of normal context. And that was done purposely. And then, of course, I had to come up with new profanities, although the ones we have now worked well too. So I mix and match, but I gave them some new profanities, and and not like Battlestar Galactica with Feldercarb. And it's like, no, man, you know. If I'm going to drop an F-bomb on you, I'm dropping an F-bomb, but you know, we got to come up with some other stuff. And so language actually plays a really key role. Splice,
Yeah.
Splice, not so much because it's a kid learning. He's very computer savvy. So and it's all in English. Everything's in English. The only time it's not in English is when it's in the Middle East, and I use actual Muslim prayers for that, so it's specifically accurate. So you know, so I'm not wandering off and inventing something like crazy Arab sounding or something like that. I didn't want it to be offensive. And a buddy of mine who's an imam read the book, and he goes, okay, sure, he's a terrorist, but he's really a smart guy. And he goes, and if someone actually did what he's doing in his book, they could probably get away with a lot of stuff. So yeah, that's good to know that I just gave somebody the blueprint of how to be a terrorist. But
you're not the first.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Tom Clancy beat me to it.
What about you, Andy? Do you have any fun invented slang or language stuff in your world?
Yeah, I was trying to think of most of my main characters are American from 2015 through 2020 or so. And the only time I really get a different language is when I'm depicting my aliens, and I don't depict their language in anything other than English. I use a different style, a syntactical style, reflecting their nature. But other than that, I just keep it in English, and I use all cap letters when they're talking among themselves.
Really, you don't like your zombie turkeys? Like they're not called zerkies or something fun like that?
Oh, that coinages. Yes, I do have
Yeah.
coinages. Yes, there's a new news network out called ZNN, the Zombie News Network,
Nice.
and I have, of course, the famous zombie ampules everyone wears around their necks, a drop of zombie blood to inject in case of severe injury so they can heal themselves, because all of my zombies regenerate. So that's, and I see you have Wes smiling there, but I can't think
All
of all
superheroes.
come up with, but I have a lot of them.
What about you, Wesley? Do you want to talk about the role of language and slang and invented words?
Very big in the first 4 books because I tried a lot of experiments, not so much with vocabulary, but with cadence and rhythm. Like I created beta speak, where they don't say I don't think, they say I think not. A lot of people have said it kind of sounds like King James English. Well, maybe so. I wasn't thinking that, but I didn't want to try to just keep inventing new terms and things for stuff, but have them speak in a way that's English and identifiable, but different. Plus, it's an alternating perspective, like an oral history. And I tried to give each character their own rhythm, their own cadence, their own way of talking. Like Malcolm, who's from our Earth, talks like where I would be speaking. And all the characters who are from Beta Earth have their dialects. And I try to make the less educated members of the family have a kind of, very simplistic tone. I be the one kind of things. And the more educated would have, a better vocabulary and more complex sentence structure. So I spent a heck of a lot of time tinkering with that in the first 4 books before I decided to settle down and talk normal.
Okay, so one of my favorite questions to ask world builders, because they often have not thought too much about this one. What do people in your world do for fun? Andy, do you want to start us off? You do
Yeah.
in a zombie turkey apocalypse for fun.
Oh, yes. Well, let's just describe the zombie humans briefly. They a lot more energy and strength than normal humans. So for fun, they will do all kinds of things like jumping off second and fourth floors and landing on the ground without injury. And because each time a zombie gets injured, their cells grow back stronger. So the more they get injured, the stronger they become. And so I'm kind of inverted the whole trope of zombies rather than falling apart. They become stronger. And they become generally more reckless, more aggressive. Human beings do, that is, as well as turkeys, and they just tend not to think very much, but just charge ahead without thought of consequence.
I'm picturing parkour turkeys, like right, like spinning over things and like boom, boom, boom up buildings and stuff. That's a wonderful mental image. That's
I will
fantastic.
make a note of that phrase, and I will use it if I may have permission.
What about you, Bill? What do people do for fun in your world?
I had some fun with that actually. I I have a group of llamias. Think of them like centaurs, but with armored shells around their butts. Um, they they discovered the game of softball, and they like that. And they make the little hot dog with the sporty pepper and all that. And I had some fun with that. You can just picture this big hulking horse creature walking around with a baseball bat and a hot dog.
I love it.
I love it.
Then I have a game called Skizzy Ball that I invented, which is kind of like soccer, kind of like rugby, kind of like a hit in the face with a shovel. So that, and then because these people are supposed to be smart, they're not just running around the plains killing things. They're supposed to be really smart. So I came up with a way of doing, I call it Tizam, but it's like 3-dimensional Chinese checkers. And one of these days I'll actually build the damn thing. But in the meantime, I actually game theoried the whole thing out, mapped it all out on how it would be played and how it could be gambled on. And so there's actually games of Tizam described in the book, and people are betting on them. And even if you don't know what it is, and I've gotten this from quite a few readers, like, I have no idea how to play this game, but I'm really interested in how they're doing this because it's strategy, and people get into that. And as long as you don't do the whole book like that, it's like a scene. And you can get away with a scene where they're, drinking some beers and playing a game of Tizam and having some fun. If I did the whole book like game theory, then that's boring as hell.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I actually put some thought into recreation on that. And they do. There's a bunch of different stuff. I don't want to waste the whole show here, but there's a bunch of different stuff that they do for relaxation, for fun, from arts and crafts to you name it, and it's all described. It's all in the book, and I thought that was a good way to give people an idea of what the people were interested in, what they were like, and something they could relate to while they're still in this very alien environment.
Yeah, and I think that's a fantastic thing for new writers to think about, right? This is why I love to ask this question, because the worlds are so rich, where you do have things like you think about recreation and all that kind of thing. Wesley, do you want to tell us what do your folks do for funsies?
Well, I took a different spin on Beta Earth because my character, who's ripped over from our planet to theirs, time goes by, has got to find some kind of way to make him an income for his family. Because one of the things they do for fun is make babies, of course. But, he starts, well, inventing games, but marketing alpha games over there. Checkers, chess, cards, backgammon, croquet, basketball, you name it. He becomes the game master of the planet by finding game makers who will make these games, and they sell them all over the world. And he makes a whole lot of money. So that's, I think it was a major thing, especially by the fourth book, when they kind of build a new Monte Carlo on this island country called Hitalik, where all the buildings are shaped like cards or checkerboard pieces or things like that. So there's a lot of games woven through the first 4 books. I don't know, anybody has a lot of fun on Seraphim Earth. I never even really thought of that. Because in all these books, religion is a big theme. And when you get religion, you don't have a lot of fun, because most religions around the galaxy are kind of oppressive and daunting and kind of take the joy out of life.
Yeah, kind of the enemy of fun, really.
But interpersonal relationships, I'd have to say, is a big way of having fun. When you have people that you like, and the game's there. And in the latest book that I'm working on now, when they go back to Alpha, they discovered that Alpha food's better than foods on Beta or Seraphim. Points for being, having better cuisine than alternate Earths.
Eating is one of my favorite pastimes. Salad. Okay, Well, awesome. So I just want to transition a little bit. We're about halfway through our time. So I want to talk now about your process for world building a little bit more explicitly. One thing that I've noticed a lot now that I've started doing screenwriting is the question you get is, why are you the right person to tell this story? And I hate it. I love it. I mean, I understand it, but especially because I like to write sci-fi and fantasy, mostly the answer is I came up with the idea. So,
Oh,
so I
really?
want to know, is there anything like from your real life experience that makes you especially suited to be able to tell the story in the world that you, or that led to the world that you've created? Um, Wesley, would you like to start this time?
I figured you'd probably ask me that. Well, it all starts from the fact that there's a guy from our planet ripped over to an alternate Earth where he's blinded in the capture. So for 20 years, he's blind on a planet where he knows nothing. He doesn't understand the culture. He doesn't understand the taboos. For a while, he thinks he's on a spaceship until it was revealed to him that he's on a different planet. So my blindness has an awful lot to do with how this character gets started. I do like to note there's one point in the story, I guess about 3 chapters in, where before that point, Malcolm's a lot me. From that point forward, he's his own man completely. Because he's going through circumstances and situations and he's reacting to things quite differently than I would. And of course, a lot of those situations are invented, so I mean, I'll never know. But my blindness.
You haven't been abducted?
No. To begin the polygamous relationships, and I didn't have to deal with the international press or the international scientists who want to know if my genetics carries the cure to the plague, or on and on and on. I put him through the ringer. So that might answer your question.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. That's a great answer. What about you, Bill? Do you have any special experience or skills that led you to the world that you created?
Well, I've been in a polygamous relationship, so I guess I got that going for me. Yeah, I traveled a lot when I was younger. I played in bands. I worked with bands, and I mean, I worked with James Brown, Ray Charles, the estate of Hootie Leadbelly.
Yeah.
So I mean, I had a lot of real life experience in the world, and I was a drug addict for a bunch of years. So I kind of have this. I know what it's like to be on the streets. That's not a pleasant place to be, but it is. It is what it is. So I have all these real world experiences that I started putting them into stories because I lost my job in 2010, and I thought I was going to lose my mind. I was working for a record company, and they just shut down, and they didn't need to, but they did it anyway. And I was going through a divorce. I was going through a lot of stuff, and I just started I wrote nonfiction for music magazines and for lifestyle magazines and for sports magazines and stuff like that. But I'd never written fiction. And I started taking these stories that I had in my head and I started plowing them out. And in 2011, a guy named Don Webb from Bewildering Stories magazine, which is still around if you want to subscribe to it, it's a great magazine. I sent him a story called Vorbliss. He sent me back a long 1.5-page rejection letter because it turns out Don and his people are very conservative, kind of Christian, polite people. And Vorbliss is most fun you can have with a plague. And it has variations of the F-bomb like 130, 140 times in it. So he turned that story down, but he pointed out that he said, I have never laughed so hard in my life at a story. Do you have anything else? Oh. And I did. And I sent in a story called And the Beat Goes Fuck, which is about a disc jockey looking at the apocalypse. And I kill a lot of people in my stuff. Just get used to it.
Right? It sounds like it. It's very deadly to be a character.
Yeah. So I wrote this thing called In the Beat.
Red shirts.
Yeah, everybody's a red shirt in my universes. But anyway, so I wrote this thing called In the Beat Goes Fuck. I sent it into him. He loved it. He sent it to his staff. They loved it. They were going to release it on 9/11.
Oh my.
September 11, 2011. They were going to release it that day. The antagonist in the book is of Middle Eastern descent. I was like, wow, that's a ballsy move. You guys are great. What incredible. I mean, you're just putting it down there, right? And then they went, somebody at their end went, oh, no. So it got released in November. But it came out and people really liked it. And they said nice things to me and they said nice things about my writing. And so I gave them more writing and they said nice things about that. And then other companies started publishing me and here I am. But I have a lot of real world experiences in it. Like there's a scene in The Brittle Riders where two women are wiping their naked breasts off with a towel in a bar. And I've been in a bar where that actually happened because they got messy and they're like, oh, screw it. They just took off their shirt and wiped themselves down with a bar rag. And so it's little things like that, little vignettes from my life that people are like, where the hell did you get that idea from? Well, I saw it last Tuesday. That's where I got it from. So that's how I got them. That's how I got them.
All right, Andy, burning question. Do you have experience with turkeys?
Zombies.
Yes, it all started with frying turkeys. We were frying a turkey for Thanksgiving. It was the pre-Thanksgiving trial of the new turkey boiler and turkey fryer. And I brought it, the golden brown turkey I brought to the table and I put it down and I said, just imagine if that turkey came back to life. And then someone around the table, and I have a lot of smart Alex in the family, if someone said, well, it'd be a zombie turkey. And I said, oh, that's what I'll write about. So that was the genesis of my zombie turkeys. The premise is the turkeys come back to life regardless. And of course, then the background of why I was the right person to write that, I have a hard science fiction affinity from my childhood, having read all kinds of fiction, science fiction from the 50s and 60s, from Asimov and Heinlein and what have you. And so I loved, and I was also really science oriented. So I wanted to take all the science I knew. Can you make a turkey come back to life with science? And you can if you, for certain values.
Like, especially because their giblets are all taken out and in that little bag.
Oh, God.
The zombie bacteria, they actually replicate any tissues that they're next to, and they will then replace those tissues when they're lost.
Okay.
And so it's part of their survival trait. The bacteria are just trying to survive, so they emulate the cells around them. And it so happens they're stronger and faster and reproduce faster than regular. That's the start of it, and my love for science fiction goes throughout. So I end up.
Well, you know, and I did make a crack saying that I like to write what I write just because I'm the one who thought of it. But actually, Riftmaker, this book that I was saying, right, takes place mostly within the same city. A lot of that was influenced by my anthropology classes. So I was a cultural anthropology major, and so tolerance and building tolerance is one of the themes, but then like building a culture from the ground up was just really intriguing to me. Just like coming from the anthropology background. So I guess in that way, I do have some experience that led to it. But I think my favorite character that I've ever created for myself was inspired again because of this 19th century quackery I just love. Excuse me. And so she is a medium in the Old West, and she hates ghosts. She just hates them. She wishes that they would just go away and leave her alone. And that was because I was actually in training to be a tour guide at the Sacramento History Museum. And so I had to come up with a character. And as we were going through the training, all of the stories were about these gamblers and grifters and thieves in the Old West. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to have a medium who scams people out of their money. Whether or not the ghosts are there, that's who this person is going to be. And so it is amazing, like the different just random experiences that you can have, little things, big things that can lead to really interesting, complex worlds in our fiction.
Did you ever read L. Sprague de Camp's dissertation on psychics?
No, I haven't.
He learned the art of being a psychic. He would do a cold read for you that would leave you bone chill. Heinlein wrote about him several times. He's like, this guy's insane. But it was all a con, and he wrote about how to do the con, how to the whole thing, you know. And it's really it's frightening how easy it is to do, you know, to be a medium. And I was going to make you a quick joke here, real fast. Did you hear about the midget psychic who robbed a bank? There's a small.
He was a small medium at large.
Large, that's right.
I know that one.
I think.
Well, and I actually, my quackery that I borrowed, so I took spiritualism, which is a religion, and, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was a spiritualist.
Yeah.
And that's usually the explanation for mediums. I found this amazing guy named Karl von Reichenbach. Not just because I live in Germany, but because he's fascinating. His research started out looking at people with sleepwalking and night terrors. And he was convinced that the moon put off a certain kind of energy these people were craving. And so they would go outside to try to get this particular energy. And so he's actually the one who coined the term sensitive. It's often used now in psychic research and things. And so I sort of borrowed from his stuff, and I borrowed from spiritualism. And somewhere down the line, I realized that I kind of had a Jedi by mistake. Sort of like a Jedi, like where the Force ghosts are the primary thing and the other stuff comes secondary. But so, yeah, this is why I love I love quack science, because it has its own internal logic that can be really, really fun. All right, awesome. So I want to ask just a couple more process-related questions. We have 13-ish minutes before our hour is up. So I think one thing that'd be really helpful for anyone who's watching who is a new writer, who's a new world builder, what are techniques that you use to keep all the details of your world straight for yourself? Like, do you keep notes? Do you just keep it all in your head and go insane? How does that work for you? I think it's Bill's turn to go first. Why don't you go first?
Okay. I do keep notes with the Brittle Riders and with Gulfstreet and Mist, and I mean, because there's a lot of different characters and a lot of moving parts in there. So I actually kept a spreadsheet with a family tree, family trees and character trees. Splice, I didn't need to do that so much because I knew everything. I was writing about stuff I knew pretty intimately. But yeah, with Brittle Riders and Gulfstreet, I definitely kept very copious notes, and then I turned those notes into appendices. In the Brittle Riders, because I'm completely a jerk, we put the appendix at the front, so it's a prependix. So you open the book, and before you get to any part of the story, there's a list of all these characters and names and all this stuff. But we did that on purpose because we originally released the book with the appendix in the back, and people complained because it was like they kept flipping back and forth. So I put it in the front, and and then we made the cover art sideways. So we give people a pretty good idea that this thing's bent.
Okay.
But it looks really cool, and people like it. So but yeah, I definitely have to keep notes, especially with something like the Brittle Riders, where I'm working with like maybe 100, 150 different genetic mutations and variances and T cells and all that kind of stuff. It's all part of the story and all part of the multiverse, and you just need to keep notes. And then for my comics, I have to keep notes because I work with different authors and different artists around the world. And they all have completely different ideas on what they want to do. And if I don't have it straight, then I make hash out of it. So I'm good with notes. I keep everything on my computer. I don't handwrite them. I keep it all on my computer.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got notes.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, because I know some people like note cards, some people like physical notebooks. I can't write in a notebook. My hand is all screwed up from trying to do art back in the day. And so I have to type everything. I don't have a choice. What about you, Wesley? How do you keep track of all of your world building?
I don't actually.
I'm sorry, Wesley. Can you tip your camera towards you just a little bit?
Yeah, my chair.
Over there, sitting up, perfect.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's doing the same thing I did before. Yeah, my recliner is busting up even as I'm sitting on it.
Oh no!
The side of it is collapsing on me. So I'm sitting here. Interesting. What was the question?
I was asking about how you keep all the details of your wonderful world straight.
I just do. I don't keep notes. I guess I'd say my process probably is I revise like crazy. So I'm going back and over this stuff again and again and again and again. So maybe it just gets ingrained into my consciousness. No, I don't really keep notes because it all, to me, I think a lot of it creates itself. In fact, I say all of my characters, with one or two exceptions, created themselves. They just showed up in my head one day. The next thing I know, I'm typing up their backstory, and how they come to join this tribe, and they do it all themselves. I'm writing their story, but they are the ones who are saying the things they're doing. They're the ones who react and do things because of who they are and where they came from.
You're more of a conduit.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of times, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely think that's the case for me.
How about you, Andy? Do you have any techniques that you like to use for keeping all your details straight?
Yeah, it evolved as time went along. In my first book, I was kind of like Wes. I just winged it. But as I went along into the second book, I wanted to make sure I was consistent between the two books because a lot of the characters carry over. So I had to actually write the backstories of all the characters after I had already written them. So I kind of filled out their backstories and explained where they were coming from and more of their unseen personalities. That was just on the character side. Then when I'm going, since I left Central Illinois where I've lived for 30 years, I started going to other places and I had to get their exact geography right. Because part of what people liked about zombie turkeys was how precise the geography was as I went across Illinois. So I did the same thing for Loch Lomond, where I have a scene in My Undead Mother-in-Law, and then for Louisiana and the Gulf of Mexico as well. So I was doing things like researching the depth of Gulf of Mexico, how deep it went, where a submarine would collapse under pressure, how deep the subs go depending on the type of the sub, different types of super yachts, location of various military bases in New Orleans, Manhattan, Kansas, all of this kind of things. And then I had a whole separate document for research. So I had my Word document for my story, and I had another Word document for my research. Organized both of them. So when I looked up details on New Orleans, I put that all in the.
You did before?
It's kind of been my technique
I
ever
have no
since.
idea how. I don't know what you did.
I have a spreadsheet
We're
that's
doing a
my
bit
kind
of
of timeline, the
Yeah.
1870s. And so, but I did like 20 years before and 20 years after. And just random stuff as I was researching, I needed to know, like, was thus and such invented yet?
Right.
So
Right.
I had, right? So I needed to know, like, did they have chocolate bars? The answer is they did, but they were new. And so,
Yeah, that's all the good stuff. Yeah, I had to coordinate between the books. It's a trilogy. I had a very precise timeline year by year, and I started at the same time I was writing. So November 2015. Then as the books went along, I went both into the future, and then now it's been passed. I am not keeping up, so the timeline is diverging because of the zombie.
Put them back in there.
It's not exactly like I remember, but I do have a timeline in a spreadsheet with a scene by
Right back
scene
in last time.
description and overview of each scene and what characters and what effect I want out of each. So when you're talking about process, that's part of my process for plotting.
Gentlemen.
This is happened before. Joey did. Sorry, folks, we're fixing my furniture.
that's okay. Well, so it's okay if we go just a smidge over our hour, because I do have one more question before we do our goodbyes. Because writing can be a very solitary experience, but is there anybody in your life that you like to bounce ideas off of or who helps you with your process as you're building these worlds? So Bill, while Wes is getting his chair fixed, would you like to start?
Well, actually, Willis is getting his chair not fixed.
Oh,
It's not cooperating. So we'll just carry on as is.
okay. Well, so Wesley, who was that with you? Who was helping you with your chair just
Oh,
now?
that's my girlfriend, Sandy.
Oh, hi, Sandy.
Hi, Sandy.
Hi, Sandy.
Does she also help you with your writing stuff, or is it mostly
No.
solitary?
She doesn't even like to read. I would have to say to my writing, I belong to a local critique group. In fact, Sunday will be our next session where we all trade passages each month, and they didn't really. Well, that wasn't a member of them for the first 7 books. Um, my wife, when she was alive, used to throw out different things. Like when I was working on the second book, she went, "Oh, don't these people ever play tricks on each other? Don't the kids ever get underfoot?" She would tell us of all kinds of things that I needed to integrate into the story. Um, but the critique group, boy, they are savage. Jeez, Lord. Uh, they rip into things. That doesn't, no, 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 no. You can't talk about women that way. You can't talk about this that way. You can't. Well, okay. So they definitely had a lot to do with this last book, Behind the Alien Lines, the one that came out on the 22nd.
You've got something in your
That's a recommendation for using a critique group. I can't tell if this is a good thing.
screen shaping has.
Wait, I lost you there for a second. She's telling me something about what the computer is saying.
In her face is something.
Oh, she sees
You
something.
look okay. You look okay to me from here.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, long as you can see him, I see
Yeah,
something.
we can see him. It's no problem.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
No, I was just making a joke that you said they were savage, and so I was asking. So in the end, is that a good thing that you've been working?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes I don't know what on earth it was they just read, because what they're complaining about has so little relationship to what I had there. And other times it does help. Like this last story that they critiqued, they really helped me build up the creatures. I had some savage creatures that were out chasing a spy, and they wanted to know what it looked like. They wanted to hear it more. They wanted more of this and more of that. So when they get into those kinds of things, pushing me to be more descriptive and active and more vivid, then that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that goes both ways.
Yeah. What about you, Bill? Do you have anybody who you bounce things off of as part of your process?
Yeah, I do actually. My publisher, believe it or not, she's really good about me just going, "I've got this great idea," and she goes, "No, it's not. Don't do that." I love working with her, so that's not a problem. I have a few friends and writers I met, and I've been doing some workshops with the more famous writers. So I've gotten some people to work with them to go over my stuff, and it's all been helpful. I mean, I always tell a funny story that I had a character in the Brutal Writers called the Snot Weasels, and it was about as important to the story as me saying this wall is red. It was just a little bit of color to give you an idea what was there. It meant nothing to the story.
I have that. I know what you're saying here, I think.
Yeah, so this one lady reviewed it. She works with some really big name authors, and she just out of kindness of her heart gave me some time. And she wrote me and she goes, I'm loving the story. I'm loving this, loving that, and everything. She goes, but what happens to the poor little snot weasels? I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? It's literally three sentences out of a 300,000 word book that is not really important to the damn book. But she had given me a lot of good advice. She'd done a lot of good things for me, helped me out, put things together for me. So I said, the hell with it. I went back and I wrote like another 1,000 words on the snot weasels and their life in the future. And then because I have these snot weasels, I have to have somebody to care about them. So I invented another character, and then she needed some backstory. So I had to create that. And then I had to wrap the whole thing up in book 3 because I couldn't just leave them wandering around the goddamn universe. So I wrapped the whole thing up and did it all in there, sent her all the changes. She calls me crying. She goes, I knew you had a soft heart in you. That's so beautiful. Thank you for this. I said, that's going to go. That's going to be on my tombstone. Creator of the Snot Weasels. Nothing else I've written. But here we are.
That's amazing. That's a great story.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
What about you, Andy? Do you have anybody in your life that helps you with your world creation?
Yeah. Well, I talk things out with my wife, and usually she'll tell me, no, that's too stupid. No one will read that. Or she will say, that's a good idea, or she'll burst out laughing. So you take the things where she bursts out laughing and you write those down. And if something is stupid or boring, she'll tell me. And so I either have to make it better or get rid of it. And that's all before I even share it with my writers group. I have a writers group I belong to. And we read each other's stories to each other, and we give critique back and forth in build each other up as well. So it's encouraging. But that's one of my edit steps is I read my whole book aloud. And when I'm reading a book aloud, it's an entirely different experience than reading it or writing it. And you then find out the cadence of your words, and you find out how stupidly you've written certain sentences, and you have to change. And then reading it aloud to my wife, certain things are extremely funny out loud, but not when you read silently. And other things are not funny at all aloud, but are funny to me in my head. And so that's a problem. And you have to fix those kinds of issues that come up when you read aloud.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to have someone so it doesn't have to be quite so solitary of a process.
Right.
Well, this has been fabulous, everybody. We're going to wrap up our live stream. I want to give everyone a chance to say your name and the name of your books again. I will take us off the live stream and we'll have a chance to wrap up ourselves on Zoom. Andy, why don't you go first and then I will finish us off.
Okay. Signing off for Andy Zach, author of 6 books and 2 series. The ones we're talking about today are the Life After Life Chronicles, starting with the zombie turkeys and their impact on American society in 2015 and 16. And then it goes to My Undead Mother-in-Law, the joys and troubles of having a mother-in-law who's a regenerative zombie and her whole family as well, where that leads you. And then with Paranormal Privateers, where our little zombie family goes around the world fighting villains that they find and are assigned to the NSA, National Security Agency, is a liaison to them, and they tell them where to go and what to do. And then they go and do it, usually with extreme violence. And then if you like short stories, I have my short story book called Oops, the tales of the zombie turkey apocalypse. And that one is just appropriate for bite-sized pieces of humor. That's where Wes liked my one story about flying pickles.
Yeah.
So that was what happens when you have
Like zombie pickles
combined with bacteria.
All right. Fantastic. Phil, get away.
Okay, I've got 5 full-length novels out. I got a collection of short stories called Stuff About Things coming out later this year. You know what? I'll make it easy for you. I've got like 7 comic book series out and graphic novels and all sorts of stuff. Just go up to BillMcSci-Fi.com. It's just like it sounds. Bill McSci-Fi spelled right there in my Zoom tab. Go BillMcSci-Fi.com. All my social media links are up there. All my books are up there. You can even go to a merchandise page and order autographed copies for your home if you want. We ship them anywhere you want. And that's it. I write stuff and people print stuff and I pay rent. That's how I live. So there I am.
All right. And Wesley?
Well, as of, again, February 22nd, I now have 8 books in the Beta Earth Chronicles. 6 of them are novels. 2 of them are short story collections. And I have 4 books I wrote about espionage that I guess a little bit old now. But you can keep up with stuff if you go to my website, which is drwesleybritton.com, and sign up for my newsletter, and you can get free stuff because we're always having contests or raffles and things like that. And you can win free books and free swag and Amazon gift cards and things like that. And find out about the works of other people. Well, like Andy, I know he's been in my newsletter more than once, I think. I don't know about Bill. I don't think we've hooked up with you yet. But there's a lot going on. I always try to keep a lot going on because I keep writing. I don't seem to stop coming up with weirdness.
And what a wonderful place to be. So yes, I was your hostess today. My name is Phoebe Darqueling. My books are the Mistress of None series, which is my medium who drinks a lot and cons people out of their money. And then Riftmaker is my portal fantasy with the steampunk world that I was talking about. There's phoebedarkling.com. The latest book that I put together was actually a collection of short stories by a bunch of different authors that are fairy tales, are looked at through the lens of the various book subgenres. So there's lots of good sci-fi and fantasy and horror all mixed together in Fairy Tales Punked. So thank you guys so much for coming out for LitCon today. People who are watching this on replay, feel free to leave us some questions on the Facebook feed and everything. We'll see about trying to answer your questions if you're joining us late. And thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you very much, Phoebe. Nice to see you, Bill.
Yeah, see you guys.
Nice to see you, Wes.
All
Yeah,
right. We are no longer live, but still recording. Woo! All right, that was fabulous. That was great. I'm so glad to have everybody today.
Oh,